can see you.
You
You
can?
can see us. Okay.
Really?
October 11th.
Mhm.
That's tomorrow's birthday.
That's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll
Yeah.
fix that. I'll
It's
fix that.
tomorrow's
I'll fix that in post.
Losing points already.
Got the wrong text.
Okay. Are you guys ready? Should we start?
Yeah.
But should
Okay.
everybody mute themselves?
Yeah. Why don't you mute
Okay.
yourselves?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to be presenting about is genealogy, but rather than the dry topic of people in dusty libraries, etc., I'm going to make it personal and talk about how I got into genealogy and how I do it and why I do it, etc. And the thing that really struck me about genealogy is that you really do need a why. Why do it? And so I'm going to kind of run through like the W5, why, when, how, what, etc. During this. So start off with the why. So it all started off for me in 1983. Pearl and I were in Israel, and we came back for a summer. We were there for 2 years at this stretch, and we came back. 85. I'm being corrected. In 1985, we came back and we passed through New York, and we visited with my cousin Jeff. And my cousin Jeff was a bit of a Holocaust scholar. So my cousin inspired me, and he gave me a Holocaust questionnaire that he got from Yad Vashem, and I took it home. And all through the 80s, I was fascinated by the act of the. I was more and more enthralled with the idea of discovering my dad's roots. This is a picture of my dad in his 20s. And he passed a few years ago in at the age of 83. I'll tell you a little bit more about him shortly. But as I started to investigate and learn about the Holocaust through my family's window, an entire perspective opened up for me. And it was like, in the analogy I'm using, is like a narrow window. Being able to see through this narrow window a whole world in front of me. And you can slide the window through the years to further in the past or more in the future, and each time catch a glimpse of a life and a world lived. And so I started to investigate and learn more and more, and I started to take recordings of my grandfather and my grandmother and started to gather pictures and maps, etc., and started to put together a snapshot of the world. So in 1988, that's me sitting with Ariel in my arms. And this picture is quite iconic in that that's Ariel, my firstborn, and he's in his father's arms. And to my right, your left, is his grandfather. And I'm going to use the mouse cursor here to gesture. So that's my dad, Joe, and that's my dad's dad, Yakel. And this is Perla's dad, Chuck. And these gentlemen here are this is my mother's father, and this is Perla's mother's father. So what we have here is we have multiple generations. We have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 four generations, actually 4 generations. That's a narrow window on the world. When you think about it, since humankind has emerged out of hunter-gatherers into the to become agriculturalists, it's about 12,000 years. 12,000 years is 480 generations, taking a generation as 25 years. And so there's only been 480 generations since we emerged from hunter-gatherers and began the agricultural revolution. And I've got here 4 of them, so representing less than 1%. So you think about the span of time, the great span of time, and we have a very narrow window to look through. And so as you gaze through this window, you have to realize just what a small view of the immense span of time we have. And that brings a great deal of relevance to the idea of meaning. In that through genealogy, through studying your family and looking at their lives and what they did and why they did it and who they were, things you also gain a little bit of the span of the immensity of time. So here is Ariel, born in 1988, a son of Ron and Perla, and I was born in 1957 in Winnipeg, the son of Joe and Ruth. And in 1929, my dad was born in Markowa, Poland, the son of Yakel and Ita Riesenbach. Yakel's dad, here's Yakel, and Yakel was born in Siniawa, Poland, only 15 kilometers away from Markowa. And he was the son of Chaim Hersch Feldmus and Chaya Schendel, and I don't know her last name. And you may wonder, why is it that my grandfather's last name, Riesenbach, is different than his father's last name, Feldmus? And that's a story unto itself for another time. And I have one sliver of information about Zadie Yakel, my grandfather Jacob's, his father's name was Chaim Hersch Feldmus. And he was born in Lezhansk, Poland, and his father's name was Shlomo. And that is it. That is after a couple of decades of doing genealogical research, amateur and not full-time and not with a great deal of skill. This is the span, this is the narrow window on time that we have, just following one strand here, the patrilineal line. Now, of course, after Ariel, we now have beautiful granddaughter Maya, and so I'll have the pleasure of extending this timeline forward. So why do genealogy? Well, we ask in genealogy the same questions we ask in many walks of life, in arts and science. Where do I come from? What meaning can I take from where I am now and the journey till this point? And how will the future know my story and know our story? If I can only go back 4 or 5 generations, how about all the generations prior to that? What is their story? Do I know it? Can I know it? Maybe with a tremendous amount of research and luck, I might be able to probe another generation or two, but that'll be it. The rest of it is opaque. It's a fog. And so when you look forward now 4 or 5 generations into the future, how will they know our story? And part of that is through, and so to answer that part, I can't fix the past, but I might be able to fix the future in that creating a compendium of information, a library of videos, audio, photographs, documentation, digitally stored, moving forward as the decades move and the technology moves, transferring this information from technology to technology as long as I can, and as long as any descendants of mine would take interest in this. And they will have perhaps the ability to go back 10 generations and look at their past. I can only do 5. So who is the man, Joe Riesenbach, the man that was my first was my first point of interest? I'll tell you a little bit about my dad. But first, a quote that I thought was pretty relevant. The tale of someone's life begins before they're born. So it's important to understand who you are by looking before before the date of your birth, because the past is prologue. So my dad was born in 1929 in Markowa, Poland, a tiny shtetl in Galicia, the southeastern portion of Poland, not too far now from what is Ukraine. And here's a picture of him in his Hebrew school. This is his class, and that's my dad. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving. And this is his sister, my Auntie Jenny. Oops. Sorry, went too fast. This is Auntie Jenny, since deceased. And this is Auntie Manya. Yeah, that's right.
Marla knows.
I'm being whispered to that this is Carrie Wasser's mom, for Jacob and Marla who know Carrie Wasser, and Cindy Wasser's mom. And so these is my dad, his 2 sisters in 1936. And you can see the Magen David down here that the kids made out of twigs. And so this tiny town, most of these people are long gone, either extinguished in the Holocaust, or the very few, and there are very few survivors, are now passed on, more or less. But this is the thin strand of photographic evidence we have, along with quite a bit of others, in fact. Let's move forward about a decade. In 1943, in the midst of the war, my dad hid in this farmhouse. This is a rough-cut lumber farmhouse, 1 floor, with a thatched roof, and the thatched roof had an attic, and they hid for 2 years plus 1 day in this attic and in the basement. And the story of their survival, how they got to the attic in 1943, what they did between 1939 and 1943, is all on my website, which we'll get to shortly, that tries to tell the tale, tries to relive their story, to bring a narrative, to bring facts, to bring meaning to the facts. And these are the people that saved them. This is Yosik and Yanina Bar, B-A-R-R, sometimes spelled B-A-R, and they are registered in the Yad Vashem Hall of Righteous Gentiles, along with their daughter Yanina, whom I met.
Well, that's Maria.
No, Maria is Yanina's daughter. This is
okay.
Yeah. And so that's 1943. So my tale of my father's survival with his nuclear family through the war is itself quite miraculous. Let's move forward into 1947. They wandered through Europe after the war. They were displaced from their home, and they ended up in Austria, in the little town of Bindermichel, in a British POW camp that was converted to a DP camp. So it was a displaced person camp. And here's a Shana Tova that they sent to Canada. And here it says 1947, Bindermichel, Shana Tova, and that's my dad. And that is his father Yekel, and that's my grandmother Ita, and here's the two sisters. Let's move forward a handful of years. He makes it to Canada. He gets a job. He finds a beautiful woman, and they get married in 1952. And this is my mom, Ruth. And this is their wedding in the Hebrew Sick Hall or something. And I've got lots of photos of the wedding. It's very, very, it's kind of classy, Art Deco-y. It's very cool. Let's jump forward into the next decade. Here we are in 1969. He's already got the big car, and he's got the bungalow house in the north end of Winnipeg. And here's myself, my younger brother Jeff, and my sister Adrian. My dad, I guess my mom is the person behind the camera, taking a picture in what looks to be the spring in Winnipeg. Already a man that is already established. He was a small grocery store owner, but he really excelled in the butcher shop, and he sold meat not just to retail, to people who walked in, but he sold it to restaurants, etc., in bulk. And here he is opening his second store. For a short while he had a second store. It didn't work out. He had to sell it and go back to the first and stay with the first store. But here he is at Ye Olde Butcher Shop in Delhi on McPhillips Street at the opening ceremonies, as the opening day, wearing a hokey hat, etc., for the festivities. Let's move forward a decade. Now in the 1970s and 80s, he saw two kids get married, myself included. So here I am standing with my dad at the formal pictures at the Rosh Pina Synagogue, now called Eitz Chaim, in the north end of Winnipeg. Let's move forward another decade, and here's my dad with grandchildren. He's got he was blessed with many. How many? Five. Okay, I didn't do the count. 5 grandchildren. This is Ariel, my eldest, and there they are sitting in Winnipeg on what looks like a summer day, and enjoying themselves. Move forward another decade. So here he's after retirement. Already he's starting to enjoy the fruits of his labor. He's got the big house, etc. And we would go there religiously. Sorry for the pun, every Pesach, and enjoy a wonderful Pesach Seder at a big, long table with 20, 25 people there crammed in, and it was a magical celebration, and the kids remember it well, of the traditional ceremony that he always led, using his strange European accent for davening. Move forward another decade, and this is in 2011, and this is here at my mom at my sister's place at some simcha, still looking fairly hale. He's already in his 80s, and this is 2 years before he passed, and he was enjoying all the fruits of life and all the pleasures that could come from that. And so you saw here me advancing these slides, only 8 slides. I advanced, and that covered a sliver of the window on what we know about the world. There's so much more to tell about the life of an individual, and that is part of the journey, to discover more about him, his father, his father's father, his mother, all the generations, all the cousins, where they live and what they did. This is the magic of genealogy, of studying your family. So much to be learned along the way. So how do we do this, or how do I do this? There's a lot involved with harvesting this information. We'll start off with research. There's a zillion websites now. Never used to be this way, but there's a zillion websites now because genealogy is hot. There's all kinds of places one can go to find information about your family, because I'm not the only one searching. There are many people searching, and if you have any distant cousins or relatives, they'll have children and aunts and uncles, and one of them might be the family record keeper, and we'll have assembled together some of the information. So many of these sites capture the information that individuals collect, and they're also professional genealogists. So here's a list of some of the places that go, and some of them are Jewish here. And then nowadays, for the last 10 years, DNA analysis has been very hot. So you spit into a tube, you send it away to 23andMe, and a few weeks later you get an email message with a data package of everything they can tell you about your genetics and about all the hundreds of cousins that they've discovered that you've got going spreading across your tree all over the world. anybody that is that also signed up and gave their DNA sample to 23andMe. You may also recall that this is there's still some ethical issues associated with this. A few years ago, in California, they caught a criminal, a murderer, I believe it was, because they found DNA at the scene, but they didn't know who it belonged to. But they found a cousin of the murderer in one of these sites. And in there, they could actually piece together the cousin's family tree and start to look at the suspects, and they found the murderer that way. So, of course, that wasn't part of the consent that you gave when you signed up for these things. And so there's a lot of issues about sending DNA. I'll just show you one of the sites now. This is called Billion Graves.
Lovely name.
Yeah. And so I can go into Billion Graves, and I can type in Joseph. Hopefully you can see this. Reason back. And it found my dad's grave. So you can click on it, and it shows you the gravestone, who it was photographed by. It shows you the gravestones around it. Of course, there's lots of ads to sell you things. And then here is the synagogue that it's at, and I can know exactly the exact plot if I ever want to visit it. So this is one of many websites that have fantastic resources like this. Some are free, some not so. As I say, genealogy is a very hot topic right now, and everybody wants your money or your DNA. Just yesterday, Friday, I got the following email here. So this is my Gmail inbox, and I got an email message from electronically generated from MyHeritage, one of the many family tree websites that are trying to get you to sign up. And it says, and I have a small family tree up on this website, not at all as large as the one I've got on the computer here, just a tiny fragment of it. But they said that they've discovered that a person in my family tree named Charna Guberman, Perla's grandmother, is also in the same family tree website as a Mr. R. Epstein in Australia. And they're asking me to look at the information in Mr. Epstein or Mrs. Epstein's site and confirm whether they're the same person or not. So if you click on the View Discovery, this is the page they'll show you. They'll show you the information that I have on the website about Charna.
Yes, it is.
And then the information that this Mr. or Mrs. R. Epstein from Australia has. And it's pretty darn close. The husband is Norman Guberman. The husband's Norman Guberman. Very likely the same person. So I answered yes. I clicked yes, and they automatically loaded onto my family tree all of that branch of R. Epstein's family tree. And you'll recognize many of these names, Perla.
Totally.
These are the relatives that it was in his family tree that didn't happen to be in my fragment. And so they all got loaded in. My family tree just grew by 9 or 10 people. So that's great. And this is the game that they play. They keep adding to your stuff and trying to make connections between you. And then I go, great, show me the family tree that now that it's extended. So this is the website with the branching family tree, blue for boys, yellow for pink for girls. It's got balloons on the people who are having birthdays soon. And I go, great, but where are the people they added? I guess I'll have to click and expand and grow. So if you click on this, oh, sign up. So that's the game. The game is they add to your website. They tell you used to have 250, now you've got 450 in your family tree, but you have to pay them in order to view them and to play the game. Some people don't mind. It's $10 a month. Other people, wouldn't want to pay this sort of thing. But I'm just giving you an idea of what the business model is for these organizations. But this is the stuff you pay for. There is a lot available for free, and one of the biggest ones are the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints. Now, I've just learned this through the genealogy, but the Mormons believe that the dead can be baptized.
Yes,
and so that's right. So what they try and do is they capture all of the information they can about deceased people, load it in their database, and then they give out lists to people who go to their temple, and they save their souls by saying prayers over them. And in this way, they can add to the Mormon faith by having all these souls be blessed. And they have billions of images and millions of index things. They have 350 million names organized into families and pedigrees. They have the censuses, I guess, from 1880, U.S., Canadian, and British. They've got all the people that arrived on Ellis Island, 22 million passengers and crew from 1882 to 1924. And they've loaded all this information in the Granite Mountain Vault. What's that? That's this. This is Granite Mountain in Utah. This is the entrance to Granite Mountain. Here's the administrative buildings, and there's the tunnel, the access thing into the core of the tunnel, 200 feet, miles in, I don't know. And you see these entranceways here. That's what's shown here at night in this glowing image down here. They started building this thing in the 1960s. It's all finished now, and a data storage company has moved in there as well, so they have armed guards at the various gateways. And they have it full of paper and digital records are all in here now, stored by the Mormons, and they're constantly adding to it, so it's protected from floods, fires, insurrection, etc. They're keeping this for posterity. Quite incredible. Some people take genealogy very seriously. So, you want to be a genealogist. What do you have to do? What are you going to gather? So first thing is documents. Back in the early 1990s, my dad, early 1990s, my dad got a communication from Yad Vashem in Washington saying somebody wants to contact you. Are we allowed to give you to give them your address? And my dad said, yeah, go ahead. And so in the mail, a few weeks later, came the following letter in Yiddish, written by my dad's mother to her cousin in Argentina, saying, dear cousin, and this is written in the early 1950s, I'm so glad you survived the war. Let me tell you a little bit about our life in Canada. Says my grandmother, Joe's mom, to her cousin in Argentina, a family we didn't even know existed. And they included in there was passport information, photographs, etc., and a letter from my contact there, Gabi, must be my third or fourth cousin, a lovely man in the town of Bahia Blanca, and we've established now a connection to a family member in Argentina, and several years, and we met several times in Winnipeg and Toronto. He came to Florida a few times. We vacationed with him even, and in the year 2000, Gabi and his wife and his parents, and me and my parents, we went on a mission to Poland in the year 2000 to go visit our native village and to see the woman who saved my dad. The two people in that photograph have long since passed, but their daughter, who was 16 at the time, now was at the time in the year 2000 was in her 70s. We went to visit her, and it was a magical trip. Up on my website if you're interested. And so back to the slide. Documents are very important. Gathering documents, email communications, testimonies. Here's this woman named Yanina that saved my father, and this is the transcript of her testimony that was given to Yad Vashem, because she's also in the Righteous Gentile lists, and here it is translated. And here we gather together maps. There's a monument in the town of Markova to a family of Jews that were hidden by righteous Gentiles, but were discovered and murdered, and the righteous Gentiles were murdered in the same town as my dad. It's a tiny village. There are only 20 Jewish families in it. One was discovered and murdered, and they created a monument there. So gathering together the photos and the descriptions on the monuments, etc., is job one. You have to harvest all the information you can and organize it. The next thing is photos. I'm a bit of a shutterbug, so I have lots of photos, and cousins have given me photos. And when my grandparents passed away, all of the photos that they had that nobody wanted, I took and digitized and collected and tried to organize. This photo up here is the home that my family lived in Markova, that my dad Joe and his family lived in. It's quite a large home. They had a little shul in it, a room that was dedicated as a shul, and there was a family Torah, the Riesenbach Torah that was used for their holidays. This was the largest Jewish home in the village, and people came there on Pesach and for Yontif, etc. It's since been converted into industrial use. I think it's like a fire station or something now. And this is a picture of my mother's mother with my mother in the baby carriage. And here is my dad Joe. Here's his father Yekel, and here's his mother Ita, and here's my mother's father. So these two individuals are spouses. Yeah. So gathering together photos, cleaning them up, organizing them, figuring out the dates is another part of the journey ahead. The next thing is audio. Back in the day, we had reel-to-reel tape recorders, and we had cassettes. And there was a lot of, we used to send each other cassette letters when we lived in Israel back home, and they would send us cassettes as letters. And I've got many of them, and I've digitized them, and so I've got recordings ourselves. We also would record Pesach Seders or conversations with my elders and even interviews. And so here is a snapshot of my file system, family history, 1967-05. That means May of 1967. Norman Guberman, Perla's grandfather, and here is all kinds of recordings. And in fact, I have a recording here of Perla's grandmother, Charna, that's her in this picture, singing My Yiddish Mama. Hopefully you'll hear this.
Mein Yiddish Mama, nicht du kein schöner so in der Welt. Mein Yiddish Mama, oi weh wie bitter wenn sie fällt.
Anyway, it's a real tearjerker. So it's lovely to have this information, to share it with the family, to hear their voices again, and to include that in part of the narrative of our family, of our family's life. There's some amazing stuff in here. I figured out how to advance. And now video. So all of us had the video camera when the kids were young, and we would record them doing all their silly things in their wonderful family celebrations. Well, all of that is on VHS or on weird tapes. Some of you may have transferred it to DVD, and it's a good thing because those tapes have only a lifespan of a few decades before it starts to disintegrate. And if it was on DVD, you better get it off DVD and get into digital format into the cloud, because DVDs can disintegrate as well. It's an aluminum sheet with it's an aluminum disc with a coating on it, and it can come apart in time due to just randomization. So here I am at my bar mitzvah. That's me in my bar mitzvah suit. Here's my mom and dad. Don't we look dashing? And I also have video of recording of my grandfather was recorded for us in several Holocaust testimonials. So here's my grandfather giving some testimony.
And from 1939 to 1942, what happened during that period? What did you do?
From 1939 to 1942.
Yeah.
Then gewesen, I was in my house, but Jewish, ich bin der Rösker,
A band?
A band.
He's saying you have to go out with the Jewish star.
What's rausgegangen mit Jews, sometime at night, we could see China, we do sound in Feld.
Yeah. Anyway, it's mixed English and Yiddish, and so we can understand it. He's not a very good explainer, but he's given this testimony numerous times, so you could piece together the various stories. And then I have my my Auntie Marion. This is one of my dad's sisters. I recently, about less than a year ago, digitized their 8mm film and gave them the digital copy. And it was, of course, it's silence, but so I put it to some music. So let's just watch a wedding from, this would be 1953 maybe, 1956. That's my mom on the right.
Ist die goldene Parwe geflogen, geflogen, und die Nacht hat geöffnet die goldene Augen. Lichtiger meiner Schlaf ein.
Be careful.
Die Nacht hat geöffnet.
Anyway, it's magical to watch a wedding from 1956, and sharing it with the family. Everybody is just amazed, looking at their parents, at them. Some of them were just being born at that time as themselves as babies, etc. All part of the narrative. And next, now hardware. How are we going to capture all this? Well, you need a lot of gadgets, or you need to know people who have gadgets. You need to scan your documents and to digitize them, and scan your photographs. The audio recordings are all on analog, and they have to be digitized. And there's devices out there that can actually make these conversions. Your VHS and your DVD tapes have to be converted. Your 8mm and all your slides. About 5 or 7 years ago, I spent the whole Christmas holiday digitizing 3,000 35mm slides using a rented machine from Henry's, putting slide after slide in, cleaning them, scanning them, filing them electronically, naming them, putting them in the right folder. Took a long time, but now and then I threw out all the slides because we never watched those slides, even though we had the projector and the screen and the carousels, we'd never watched them. But now they're digitized, they're rolling on in my dining room. You may have seen them on my dining room monitor in constant rotation, so we see all the photos of the family from the years gone by. Software. You're going to need, there's different pieces of software to do different things. The most important stuff is organizing, filing, and backing up your information. That is actually the core data. Then there's family tree software that actually enables you to type in the name, the birth date, the birth location, who the spouse is, what the names of the children are, what their birth dates were, who their spouses are, etc. That's family tree software. Then the software to capture and control the images, the audio, the video, and the documentation. And then finally, to put it all together into web or a beautiful booklet or perhaps active on social media. So this is how I do things, and I'm going to go through this quite quickly because this is uber geek. We can use the Windows file system to organize things. All my photos and all my documents are organized by year, and I have backup software. It would be a terrible thing to go through all this work and have a computer glitch or a fire in the house or something stolen or ripped off or something and lose it all. So constantly backing it up. Stuart and I were nodding to one another. We each back up in like 3 different places. We put things on hard disk in the safety deposit box. We put things in the cloud. We have a separate room with a computer in it that backs it up. So if you've ever been burnt this way, backing up is what you do is religiously thereafter. And then you need family tree software. There's lots of it out there. I use something called Legacy 9. It's on the left-hand side. It's a bit old, but it does the job nicely. Or if you don't want to install software, you can pay your $10 monthly fee, and you can use a site like MyHeritage and put your family tree up on their site. And they have beautiful software. There's beautiful routines in there to enable you to do things like this. This is called a fan layout, where I have my great-great-grandparents here at the core of the fan, and then each generation fanning out from there. It's a bit outdated. I haven't got our beautiful Maya in there and a few other cousins, but you can get these beautiful fan-type drawings, and there's all kinds of ways you can display this information. The next thing is you'll have to be able to capture and organize your photos and to clean them up. Many photos are faded, cracked, dusty, and there's lots of software out there to enable you to clean it up. There's a lot of apps on phones too that can do that now, but the apps on phones are good, but the dedicated software is even better. So these are the tools I use, something called Lightroom and Photoshop and something called Topaz Labs. And thank you, Stuart, you put me onto Topaz Labs, and I did buy that package. And then audio and video. So there's crackly audio and video. There's videos of you photographing your kids doing something, with the camera pointed at the ceiling. So if you edit it all up, you'll make it much more enjoyable to view for those that are going to be viewing it. So there's editing software for both the audio and the video. And then finally, to actually package this all together, you want people to see it. So you want to put it up on a website or on a blog or on YouTube. And I've got all these tools to enable me to build my website and to put my information up, and I'll show you in a moment. So now you want to share it. You put it all together, and you've gone all the other work, now you want to share it with folks. So to gaze through your own and to share it, you have to start with a tangible, practical objective. Just don't go into it and say, I'm going to start gathering information. Make an objective for yourself. I want to give a gift to somebody for a birthday that's coming up of their family tree. I want to make a booklet of all the photos of this particular member of my family. I want to create a small website for the upcoming wedding of so-and-so. So it really is important to start with a very modest objective and plan to spend time on it. It takes tons of time to figure out the tools and to get it to work. And the most important thing is organization, is getting this stuff properly filed and organized and getting a plan in place. I'm not going to go through this. If you want, I can send you this kind of list of hints here of what to do. But it does take time to make this work well. It's not enough just to throw a bunch of scribbles and lines on a page and say, there's my family tree. You want to build a narrative. You want to build a story that actually brings meaning to the data. So it's going to take you to my family website, but before I do, I just opened with my dad. I want to close with my dad, so I'm going to say L'chaim, Dad. Thank you very much for inspiring me to do this wonderful hobby. And I'm now going to be working on your side of the family, on my mom's side of the family, Perla's side of the family, and create a legacy. So let me just go back now to reasonback.com, and I'll show you how I built it. And this will be the last thing I'll show you. So here's reasonback.com. That's me as a kid. No, it's me as an adult, Ron. What do you think? And here's a welcome, and I've broken it up into like 4 areas. A blog, my family history. When my dad passed, I created a memorial site for him. And then some photos, because I'm a photo bug. So go into the family history section. And I've got, there's that postcard you saw. Here's the picture of the kids you saw. A little opening describes why it was important for me to create this site. Here's the story of Joe's survival and the Reasonback family. If you click on this, you go to the subsite that tells you the story of their survival in photos and in words. And I'm just going to scan through it. This is where visiting the grave in the year 2000 of the people that saved my dad. Here they are in Binder Michel, the DP camp. And then footnotes of things that happened before then. So that's that little thread. That's the story of survival. And then I have some testimonials from my grandfather Jacob, and you saw a little clip of that. So here's the whole thing. It runs quite long. Here's my dad. He's given several testimonials. Here's one done in 2006. Here's one done in 1989. Here's one done in 1997. So each one, they're more, they're 95% the same, but sometimes you learn something new in one that you didn't hear in the other, because a memory comes back to him or does something. And then I've also interviewed my grandfather, and here's the audio recordings that I interviewed him in 1986. I sat at the table, and hearing my own voice is so weird. But here I am interviewing my grandfather. And then we traveled to Poland in the year 2000, and here's our mission to Poland. So I can click on this, and I go through day by day, that we were there for 8-ish days, day by day. So here's a description of where we went. So here's where we went on September 19th, 2000, and what we saw. And here we are in that area. And then on September 22nd, we were in Auschwitz, and here we are in that area. And September 23rd, we had a little tourist sideline at a salt mine. This is the 16-year-old girl that saved that was in the family of 3 that saved my father. Here we are meeting her. Here's our reunion, and each one of these underlined things here takes us to a photograph. Hopefully these work. Haven't checked them in a while. Yeah, they do. Okay. So each one is a link to a picture or something like that enhances the story. So it's a kind of a multimedia story. And then there's video clips of that I took along the way as well, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's that thread. Mission to Poland. And then here's Janina, the 16-year-old girl. Here's her testimony about what she remembers, and this was required by the Yad Vashem things. And so here's her original letter in Polish. Here's the story on the Museum of Polish Jews website. Here's the Yad Vashem Righteous Among Nations. Each one's a link to a different area. My cousin Gabi, this is the fellow from Argentina that joined us. He also is a bit of a history buff, and there's all kinds of links to stuff in Spanish, but it all got broken because the Spanish site changed their thing, so I have to bring that all back in. When I retire, I'll bring all the Spanish stuff back in. And here's a Canadian Jewish news story covering Joe's mission to Poland. So there's a story, and again, I got a link there. Here's a story about the Torah that was actually brought to Toronto. They brought the Torah. That was one of the only things they had with them in hiding in that bungalow, that tiny little house. Photos. And there, and this is the story of what happened to that Torah. Oops, there's a notice here. And here's a story written by my mom about another relative of hers called the ring, a ring that she smuggled in her anus through Auschwitz that was very important to her and brought to Winnipeg. And when she passed, she left it to my mom. And my mom wrote a story about that ring and about that family member. Yeah. And then in 1978, there was a 50th wedding anniversary for my grandparents, so Joe's mom and dad. And we recorded the whole thing on audio, and here it all is, speeches and presentations and things like that. It's all very corny. And then here's the family tree. So that's my history section. And so I just want to bring things to a close right now by saying that this is a wonderful hobby and it's a great way to rediscover the world through a narrow window onto history. And it just started. I've only done my dad's side and just selection part of my dad. We've got a lot of work yet to do. The end.
Unmute them.
They can unmute themselves.
No, unmute everybody.
I'm exhausted.
I can just say that I have to stop binging Netflix. You also.
It's remarkable
My
what
life-
you've done.
Yeah.
That's
It's
what a
remarkable
story.
that we're still married.
It's an all-consuming hobby, it looks like.
And beautifully explained. Thank you, Ron.